Well, separation continues to dominate the debates at the Saskatchewan legislature. This week, the NDP introduced an anti-separation bill, while the Premier says the only group talking about the issue is the opposition. To discuss this, we're joined by our weekly political panel. Murray Mandryk writes a political column in the Regina Leader-Post in the Saskatoon Star-Phoenix. We're also joined by Jeremy Symes, who covers the legislature for the Canadian Press. Good morning, Jeremy.
Good morning.
Good morning, Murray.
Good morning.
So, Jeremy, let's start with you. Premier Moe pushed back on suggestions that he and members of his caucus are courting separatists. Where does this all stem from?
Yeah, so it stems from the opposition NDP. They had a news conference this week in Regina. We had Jobs critic Alina Young sharing online screenshots of David Chan. He's a Saskatchewan Party MLA for Yorkton, and Jamie Martins, the Sask Party MLA for Martinsville, Blairmore. And the screenshots showed they were part of this Unified Grassroots Facebook group, and they joined about a year ago. So Unified Grassroots right now has a petition online calling on Saskatchewan to negotiate a new deal with Ottawa or look at separating. And so the NDP is trying to make this link that Chan and Martins, because they're part of this group, they might have some separatist sentiments. They also pointed to a podcast of Nadine Ness. She's the leader of Unified Grassroots Roots, who called Chan one of us in her podcast. And so Ness also had a phone call with Premier Scott Moe in 2021 during the COVID time, so he's familiar with her and this group. The Saskatchewan Party caucus said in a statement that Chan and Martins are not part of Unified Grassroots, and Unified Grassroots has accused the NDP of discrediting their group. We asked Premier Moe about this. He says he has no issue that they're part of this Facebook group, and he says, there are people in his caucus who have spoken with Unified Grassroots, and he's maybe even spoken with some folks of this group, even though they've never identified to him that they're part of this group.
And Murray, you called the response from Moe and his fellow MLAs this week in your column spineless. Why?
Well, this is specific to not denouncing any separatist thought. And why it is, or why I believe it is because they swear an oath to the province, to the country, as to what their duties are to uphold Saskatchewan as part of Canada. This is what Scott Moe says almost on a daily basis. This is what he points to in terms of the Sask Party founding convention and constitution, that we are supportive of Saskatchewan in a united Canada. If this threat of separation is serious, we need leaders speaking out about this. I think there's a lot of gamesmanship being played out in this particular issue. You notice the polls where there is support for separatism in this province, according to Angus Reid, but it seems to be largely strategic support, because you're seeing a lot of more Sask Party supporters than NDP or other parties supporting the notion simply to make the point to Ottawa that we're mad at the federal election results, we're mad at how we were treated in the past. And there's reason to be mad, obviously. What there isn't reason to be is to use something like the threat of separatism, which is a serious threat, which has economic consequences for us. Look what happened to Quebec. Look what happened to Montreal after the last separatism rallies. People aren't thinking about it from the grander scheme of what this does when you want to attract head office jobs, when you want to attract investments. And I think the NDP have a damn good point in that particular area, because we don't need anything in Saskatchewan that causes people to fly over Saskatchewan anymore. This would be the one thing that would do it. People need to be smarter and not just necessarily think their politicians are wise because they agree with their relative political view. No, I don't think Chan or Martins are separatists, but I think that they're not being courageous, nor is Scott Moe, and they're not doing their jobs, which is to stand up for this province in this country.
Yeah, I noticed the Premier saying earlier this week that, the NDP are the ones raising this. And last night you saw the Premier posting that Angus Reid poll that showed some of those results that Murray alluded to there, Jeremy. Earlier this week, the opposition brought forward a bill relating to this, their so-called anti-separation bill. What was the point of that?
Yeah, so this bill is coming from NDP leader Carla Beck. It's her private member's bill, and the point really is to make it harder for Saskatchewan to hold a referendum or a plebiscite on separating from the rest of Canada. So currently our law in the province says voters can initiate a plebiscite if 15% of them sign on to a physical petition. What Beck's bill would do would increase that threshold to 30%. So you need a lot more signatures to even initiate a discussion on this. Like Murray mentioned, Beck is saying this is really serious and it deserves that higher bar to be met if we're going to have a vote on this. She says a referendum, even if it fails, would damage the province's economy, economy, the Quebec independence movement, the 1970s into the 1990s. We saw headquarters leave Montreal, scaring off investment there, going to Ontario for the most part. Beck's bill also bars the government or legislators from initiating a referendum unilaterally. So she's saying if the government wants to put this for voters, it should come maybe in the form of a general election so that the next government would have a clear mandate on this. Now, Premier Moe has said he would allow a free vote on this, but we're already getting indications that he won't support it and that his caucus won't support it either. He says increasing this threshold really is just a form of silencing, just because it would be that much harder to get something like this forward to the public.
Murray, what do you think of the bill?
Well, no one's being silenced, first of all. They still get an opportunity to present their views by signing this petition. But what happens to the rest of us that don't want to sign the petition or don't want the consequences of the petition, which is the aforementioned instability that we talked about earlier? Like, we have rights too as people that don't want to get caught up in nonsense that's bad for the economy, that's bad for the country, and is certainly not productive in any particular way. I guess whatever group for whatever narcissistic reason can do whatever they want, but there should be a reasonable standard as to what this ignites and at what level. I don't know if 30% is significant or 15%. To be quite frank, I don't think this group has the capabilities of getting that level of organization and whatnot, but they might plug into people that do. They might gin up enough people to think that this is a good idea. As I suggested earlier, there's a massive political element when you look at the polls and how many NDP versus Sask party supporters are in favor or opposed to this is what seems to be a political tactic. It shouldn't be a political tactic. Yes, we got massive problems with Ottawa. We always have. The last Trudeau government wasn't sympathetic to our needs. Maybe the Carney government will be more sympathetic. Yes, there's people that are frustrated, but you don't do something like this because you're mad over the last federal election results. There's other methods to handle this, and if anybody thinks we're better off as a separate landlocked nation in the middle of wherever, or that maybe Donald Trump's United States will bail us out or will join this, it's stupidity. It's absolute nonsense. And individual people, the electorate has to kind of wake up a bit and realize don't follow the dumb ideas of politicians blindly.
And Jeremy, speaking of that relationship, the Prime Minister spoke to premiers this week. There's some news on that.
Yeah, the next premiers meeting is going to be in Saskatoon.
Book your hotels, guys.
Yes, so I'm sure we'll be going, and that'll be interesting to watch. But so Prime Minister Carney met with the premiers after his meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump, and his meeting with the premiers was just to really provide a debrief with how that meeting with Trump went. We didn't see any of those fireworks that happened with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, so I think the premiers felt really good about that there weren't a lot of tension there in that Trump meeting. But Carney and the premiers also talked about, building up Canada's economic resilience, maybe big nation-building projects, removing internal free trade barriers. We spoke to Moe about this as well, and he said he felt pretty good after that meeting. He appreciated that debrief that he got, and he said there maybe is a more positive tone going forward with Trump on this, which he also appreciated. And he also said Carney is open to conversations on Bill C-69, clean electricity regulations, the emissions caps. Obviously, he's still saying concrete change needs to happen there for the relationship to get better with the federal government, but so far the tone is looking positive.
And Murray, what are you watching for with this relationship?
Well, whether the Prime Minister starts addressing issues of the nation, because obviously Western alienation is real. Eastern provinces have their issues as well. If Daniel Smith is making one really solid point right now, I think it's that it's patently ridiculous that Quebec and Ontario, as the biggest economies in our country, are getting equalization payments. They shouldn't just out of form be able to do this, because that, as Smith has noted, is not what equalization was meant for. So I think generally speaking, we're dealing with something where we're getting to base issues that weren't being dealt with under the Trudeau administration, likely going back to the Harper administration, to be honest with you. We were trying to figure out the last time whether we had one of these meetings in this province. I think we have to go back to 1985 when Grant Devine was saying, "Don't say woe in a mud hole," quite literally at these meetings. I know I was covering it. but this is how the country, such as well as it works. We get together with the premiers. We sort out problems. We have discussions. We don't threaten separation.
Murray, Jeremy, thanks for your time.
You're very welcome.
That's Murray Mandryk, writes a political column in the Regina Leader-Post and the Saskatoon Star-Phoenix. Jeremy Symes covers the legislature in Saskatchewan for the Canadian Press.